Thank you. Kia ora and welcome to our second information session on the Community Refugee Sponsorship Program. Really excited that you're joining us for this session. And as you've just seen, we're recording the session. So if that's a problem for you, please close your video. And if you want, take your name off so that it doesn't come up in the video. And I can hear myself twice. Are you all good with the sound at the moment? Yep, okay. Just before I start with introductions, I would like to open our meeting with a karakia to bring us all together into this space. Tūtawa mai I runga, tūtawa mai I raro, tūtawa mai I roto, tūtawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, taikie. Come forth from above, below, within, and from the environment, to calm and settle the vital inner essence, the well-being of everyone, be joined, together, united. Ko tangata tiriti toko iwi, kei te noho o ke whanganui atara, ka host Aotearoa New Zealand ahau e mahi ana, he kai whakahaere matua ahau, ko Birgit Graffa and Watungwa toku ingoa. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. A really warm welcome to you all. And before we get started on the session on the Community Refugee Sponsorship Program, I'd like to introduce my co-presenters and my team today. With me here today are Sarah Ward and Alice Garner from Immigration New Zealand. And I'm really excited to introduce my new team. Some of you who may have been at our first information session know that I was the only one on the program at Host Aotearoa at the time. So I'm really excited that we've got a team together working on the Community Refugee Sponsorship Program. We've got Edwin Reverol, who is our program support. We've got Giselle Iradukunda, one of the community sponsorship coaches, and we've got Sarah McDonald, also one of the community sponsorship coaches. So really excited they're joining us today and also presenting on the program. Just before we get right in, I just wanted to say that today's session is really an overview of the Community Refugee Sponsorship Program in New Zealand. It's about the information that we're going to share that will help organizations make a decision if they want to become sponsors in this program. So it's not so much about whether refugees are eligible for the program or not, it's more an overview for sponsors. We are going to touch on the refugee criteria, but if those are specific questions you might have, it would probably be good to discuss them outside this meeting. Saying that, we will have time at the end. We've allowed quite a bit of time to answer questions tonight. So if you have any questions, if you can leave them until the end, and you can then have an opportunity to ask them in the wider forum so that we can answer them. If we don't get to all the questions, we'll make sure that we follow up on the questions afterwards. And again, really warm welcome to you all. Lovely to see so many friends, colleagues, and interested organizations here tonight. Kia ora, and I'll hand over to Sarah McDonald.
Kia ora koutou katoa. It's wonderful to be here as part of the Host Aotearoa whānau to let you know a little bit more about the Community Refugee Sponsorship Program. So today my part that I'll be talking about is locating this program in the global context and then kind of locating it here in Aotearoa for us to understand the sort of the whakapapa of this program globally but also locally. So you'll have to, my eyes will dart off to the side, there's two screens in front of me. So in the global context, New Zealand has signed many UN conventions and particularly around the protection of refugees. So under that, we are under our international obligation as signatories to these conventions. We need to participate in protecting those who are fleeing from war and persecution. So underpinning those conventions, and that there are outcomes and values. So the program, the community sponsorship program, really starts to tick a lot of these boxes. So boxes such as protection, obviously the durable solutions. We know that the systems are creaking, the quota system only has a certain amount of capacity. So this program sits alongside the other pathways. International responsibility sharing. So we are part of a global whānau, if you like, and it is part of our responsibility to be looking after people here in Aotearoa. Increased settlement spots. So of course this program, it sits alongside, it's a complement to programs, so therefore it offers more space, maybe more pathways for people to find safety. It also brings this community building, that's volunteering. So community sponsorship is like a whole society approach to resettlement. And then also it really encourages that partnership and accountability between communities, governments, and those who arrive here as refugees. So it's pretty, it's a wonderful pathway, and obviously we're very excited that it's here in Aotearoa. It's a global movement. So Canada, obviously they were the pioneers, I guess, but now, UK, Argentina, Ireland, we look towards Ireland quite a lot in the planning of this program. So now I'm just going to take us to the next slide, and we begin to start to locate this program in Aotearoa. So to locate this program in Aotearoa is to locate it within Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, principles of partnership, protection, and participation. And values such as manakitanga, obviously is something that we all know quite well sitting here in Aotearoa, in terms of showing respect and generosity and kindness and care for each other. So with that in mind, that's where HOST is running our program from. But also the program in the wider, it sits next to it. We have our obligations, our international obligations met by having this program here in Aotearoa. It sits alongside Refugee Quota Program and the Refugee Resettlement Program. And it really provides this opportunity for society to be able to engage. Community sponsorship also, it improves the quality of integration, and there's been a lot of research globally to say that integration through these programs of whānau who arrive here as refugees is increased. The chances of them integrating is increased. So it's this give and take, and you'll hear people who have experienced the sponsorship program talking about the reciprocal nature of the process. So, in Aotearoa, upholding the strengths of tauiwi, so those arriving here in New Zealand, upholding the strengths of tangata whenua and Pākehā together, and that's what locates this program here. So moving on to the next slide, as you'll see, this diagram really sort of shows it all. So we're talking about a healing-centered, rights-based approach where the whānau or the individual who arrives here with this refugee journey experience in their lives sits in the center. And then the organizations who come around those people then become the connectors, and all this freedom to explore, feeling safe, schools, that connection to everything that we need to feel a sense of belonging. And that is what community sponsorship really is all about, is how do we awhi those whānau to come in and help them to connect into Aotearoa and find their place. So getting back, the next slide. So getting back to, again, that, the whakapapa of what happens in Aotearoa. So There was a pilot for 2 years, 2017 and 18, where we saw 24 people arrive here under a sponsorship program, and that was a pilot run by Immigration New Zealand and MB alongside community organisations. And the pilot was a fantastic success and a wonderful partnership between government and community organisations. So through that pilot, community leaders who were involved, they not only were participants, but they also became great advocates for the pilot. And some of you may have heard of some of, is it Nick Gretel and in the Southwest Baptist Church and others who have really spoken up to advocate for this program because they've seen the power of it. So that leads us to our 3-year extended pilot, and that's where we're sitting now. So 150 people within 3 years. And as part of the review of the initial pilot, it was sort of suggested that there needed to be an umbrella organisation to really coach organisations through the process, application process, but also through that time that they're looking after the whānau, so that 2-year period that they have signed up for. And that's where host, obviously, we come in to support that. So just to the next slide. So it comes to what I was talking about before, the whānau is in the centre, and then the approved organisation is wrapping right around that family and becoming the connectors. And then us as host, connecting also with mana whenua, with government agencies, with service providers to make sure that we have strong relationships to be able to pass those through to you as well. So you have your own networks, we have our networks, and we all start to network out, and it becomes this wonderful web of support for families. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the context. Now I'm going to pass you over to Giselle, and Giselle's going to take you through some of the nuts and bolts.
Hey, kia ora, ko Giselle toko inga. Thank you, Sarah. Yep, so my name's Giselle. So I will be covering the following areas. So firstly, the eligibility of sponsoring groups. Second, I'll be covering the practical steps for sponsors to apply, and then the responsibilities of an approved sponsor. So there's quite a few requirements before an organisation can apply. So first, you'd have to be a legal entity, so have a legal structure. So that can either be an incorporated society, a charitable trust, a company, as long as you've got that governing body and you're registered. So second, as Sarah talked about, that wider community outreach. So we're looking at your connection to service providers in your area. And then thirdly as well, we're looking at, so you'd have to demonstrate that you've had some experience, not just working with former refugees or refugees, but you've got experience working with marginalised people, vulnerable people here. And then next, have financial capacity. In your settlement plans, you'll write what services and what financial help you are going to offer the refugees. So you just have to make sure, refugee whānau, so you just have to make sure that you've got the financial backing to be able to offer that assistance. I'll talk a little bit about the financial capacity as well through the presentation. Next, deliver settlement services. So firstly, it's not expected, but post-arrival, the refugees, you have to have secured accommodation for the refugees. It's not compulsory that you secure accommodation prior to the refugees arriving. Sorry, let me take that back. It is not a requirement that you secure accommodation when Immigration NZ will let you know once flights and booking have all been sorted, and so that's your cue to secure accommodation and start paying. And then lastly as well, but most importantly, you will be required to enter into a deed of agreement for service with Immigration NZ. Next, Birgit. So practical steps to apply. So first and foremost, you have to complete the application form, as well as ticking that you've got all the attached documents. Second, the settlement plan, that's very, very important. Host Aotearoa with the cultures, me and Sarah, should be able to guide sponsors through the settlement plan. Thirdly, that you've provided financial information, and a budget as well. So this is a specific budget for the course program. So that's taking into consideration housing, that's taking into consideration maybe schooling, stationery, orientation services, translators, and etc. Next is that you have to have completed the child protection course. So that's an online course, and it is provided by Safeguarding Children. And they provide a certificate once you've completed the course that you will attach with the application form once you're ready to submit your application. Next, so you have to have child protection statement. Some organizations already have policies in place, but yeah, we want to see your policies in your procedures, just in case a situation was to arise and you are working with vulnerable people. We want to see that you've got the right procedures in place to manage risk. Lastly, but very important, you have to have completed police vetting. So that's your 5 to 8 in the committee, in the group, are the only ones that have to complete the police vetting, and that's done through NZ New Zealand. And we can assist in that as well if your organisation is not an approved agency. So just contact Host Aotearoa and we can assist. Next, Birgit. So responsibilities for approved sponsors. Again, you are committing to a 2-year financial, but also helping sponsored refugees in the community for the 2 years, connecting them to service providers, enrolling them in education, education, health, and connecting them to Te Ao Māori and Tangata Whenua. So you are committing to working with Host Aotearoa alongside Immigration NZ for the 2 years, and that's with travel arrangements, that's logistics, that's post pre-arrival for the refugees, but also post-arrival. So you're working with the two groups along the way. So you're also expected to welcome the whānau once they land in Aotearoa, that you will be at the airport, kind of giving that warm reception. You're also required, to have sorted accommodation prior to the refugees arriving, but Immigration NZ will let you know once booking has been confirmed, and so that's when you automatically then start paying for the accommodation, but you still have to tell us in the settlement plans how you go about finding accommodation, because we know that's quite a big challenge. So yeah, we understand. Next, you provide financial assistance until payments are available. So these are payments from work and income. So refugees, when they do come here, automatically will be permanent residents. So they will be entitled to the all the other income support that New Zealand residents or citizen is entitled to. So the accommodation supplement to go towards accommodation and working and job seeker support benefit. So you just have to make sure that the financial support that you're giving them is equivalent or does match the support that they will get from work and income. So assist refugees to enrol in education. So that could be a course, that could be language support, again, helping them sign up for JP, healthcare, dentistry, etc. So the everyday stuff. And again, we are still saying that we want to see that wider community outreach. And then most importantly as well, we're expecting sponsors to help sponsored refugees to connect with tangata whenua o te ao Māori. That could be, you know, having welcoming them at the marae for a pōwhiri. That could be a range of things, but again, Host Aotearoa will be able to assist, but would love it if you've already got those connections and yourself, so start building up those connections. Lastly, but very important, we're wanting refugees when they do come here to, you know, the first month, everything is very, very overwhelming. The second month, they've got a bit of orientation around the area, but ideally we want them to secure permanent employment opportunity. And so we're wanting you as sponsors to also assist in that process. So that could be sitting down and, you know, writing what the job prospects would be, but also, as Sarah said, it is the refugee at the refugee whānau or individual at the very centre. So it is also asking them, like, what would you like to do? These are the options, you know, what, you know, how can we assist you as well? Yeah, so I'll go to the next slide, Booga. So we were supposed to have Nick from the Southwest Baptist Church. He joined us on the last information session and spoke about his experience as as a sponsor group. So they were part of the pilot, as Sarah has said, and they, sorry, I'll just read this out. So I think Nick, in his talks, he always talks about the friendships, of building friendship with the former refugees, walking alongside them, but also not allowing them to live independent lives. So you are giving them the financial support at the very beginning, but it's about empowering them to be able to make the decisions that they need to do. So yeah, so we appreciate Nick, and I think, yeah. So I'll get Sarah Ward to talk about the next slide, and so that's refugee criteria and the different pathways that process that refugees can come here. Sarah.
Thanks, Giselle. Nice to see so many familiar faces. This is a very busy slide. It's a, oh, hi, Dennis. Saying thanks to Giselle, but it's nice to see there, Dennis, as well. So there's two pathways to sponsor or support former refugees to come to New Zealand. One option in this program is as a sponsor, an approved sponsor agency or organization, you have an option to nominate a particular family that maybe you're connected with or you're aware of from overseas. The second pathway is to be matched with a UNHCR identified family. So I don't think I'll go into heaps of detail about this slide, but I think that's just important to know that there's two tracks. And as part of this pilot, we're really keen to explore both opportunities. So I'm hoping there's organizations out there today who are interested in looking at both pathways. The start of this map is you're already here, you're interested, and you've spent your evening, you've put off your dinner for an hour, and you've come to listen to us talk about why you should be a community sponsor. So you're already at the first bubble. And you've connected with hosts because you've been invited here. So we're halfway through this flowchart already, practically. Once you've listened to us talk about how great it is to be a sponsor and you've been coached through the application process with hosts, your application to become an approved sponsor will be reviewed by a panel. And it's assessed against those criteria that Sarah McDonald was speaking about earlier. The panel is made up of former refugees, hosts, other government bodies, and we're looking for all those components around connections to community. And essentially, we want to know you understand what you're getting into for the next 2 years and actually the nature of the commitment. I think without going into heaps of detail, the takeaway from this slide is it's not a quick time period from the time that you are you're approved as a sponsor until the family comes. So we will aim through Immigration New Zealand to get families here as soon as possible. But I think, especially in a COVID environment, what's worth pointing out here is you've got any family you're nominated with or that you're matched with will have to go through an immigration process like other people coming in through. So they have to meet health requirements, and there's risk assessments and everything else that any other refugee would have to come through as part of the process. And then we look to arrange travel. So we say, you know, we'd like to get people here in a year from when when they're matched with the program. But what we're going to ask from all sponsors is a bit of patience, understanding, and a lot of back and forth between immigration and host and the sponsor organizations, because we'll have to work around a lot of travel logistics, especially in the COVID world. I saw there was a question. I think we're going to catch them at the end. Is that right? Yep. Okay. Can we go to the next slide? So I'm just going to touch on this quickly. If you're a sponsor organization and you have a specific individual or family that you're wanting to bring, I think it's important you understand the criteria just before you start on this journey. So to be eligible for the course program, the refugees that's being sponsored needs to be under the UNHCR mandate. So that means they're known to UNHCR, they're out of their country of origin, they've sought protection in a secondary country with the UNHCR. Second criteria is security risk, there's settlement, and there's health assessments that families need to meet. So people coming under the course criteria need to meet the same kind of health requirements that you'd be required to as a migrant coming to New Zealand. As far as the countries that you can come from, I think that might have been the question that popped up there. There's a broad range of countries. Essentially, it's almost anywhere in the world that the UNHCR has identified as a priority area. And that's a huge range. There's a link on HOST website, and I know the INZ website, so you can see what the UNHCR priority areas are. But it also has to be a country that New Zealand would normally pull from as part of our humanitarian stream. So that's Africa, the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific, Middle East, and North Africa. So the only continent that's missing from that is Europe. And the reason we don't take from Europe is because there are so many other European actors already offering resettlement and complementary pathways that this is about creating more humanitarian space and doing our piece as part of that global picture. The other key one is that the person being sponsored, it can't be eligible for another Immigration New Zealand category of migration. So, and this is a big one, it's that families are not eligible if they can come under the refugee family support category. And that's because, again, this is meant to be a complementary pathway. Government doubled the number of spaces under the family reunification category this year, at the same time that they increased the course numbers and the refugee quota. So it's about, again, trying to create more spaces overall in that humanitarian pathway. No, the Ukraine is not an eligible country because it's in Europe. Is this my slide? I'm looking. Yes, I'm guessing I'm going to go with it. Stop me if not. So for the course program, it's slightly different than the quota. If you're familiar with the quota, you'll know it focuses on families who are most vulnerable and most in need of protection. And that's, again, the complementary nature of the course program. We're asking families that come through the course program to have a basic understanding of English, a minimum of 3 years work experience or a qualification where they've studied for at least 2 years at tertiary level, and to be aged between 18 and 45. That's only for the principal applicant. So the whole family obviously doesn't need to be between 18 and 45 and studied, but we're looking for the primary applicant to meet those criteria. And that's around helping people under the sponsorship category get into education and employment quicker. Turkey is not, oh yeah, sorry, Turkey is in Europe, thanks, Sarah. I don't think this is my slide. Is this yours, Birgit?
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Sarah. So we saw the quote from a previous sponsor, so we thought it was equally important to have the voice of the sponsored refugee here. We made the conscious decision, and if you've been to our previous information session, that we don't invite them into this session because it is quite daunting having to tell their story so many times. But if you do want to know more about how the resettlement has been for refugees, we can talk to you about that in a bit more detail. So this is just one of the refugee families that came through the pilot program. And so you've heard quite a bit about host at the moment. So I just really wanted to talk to you about what are we doing as the umbrella organization. So we're really fortunate that we're the umbrella organization for the extended pilot. And our role is to support community organizations through the sponsored journey, all the way from the beginning. So if you think about that process map that Sarah was talking about, we're there alongside you from the beginning. So while you're even making the decision if your organization is suitable for the community refugee sponsorship program, we can talk to you already at that time until you make the decision that you want to formally go through the application process. We'll provide you advice, we'll provide you with resources and information and guide you through that whole process. And during the application process as well. So Giselle outlined some of the practical steps to take you through that application process, and we can work alongside you to coach you through that and what you might need to take into consideration when you're developing a settlement plan for a refugee or refugee family that you may be wanting to sponsor. Once and if organizations are approved as sponsor organizations, we continue to work alongside the organizations to help prepare for the arrival of the refugees. And so that support is twofold. We're working alongside the sponsoring organization during the application process for the refugees while they're preparing their application process. And if they are approved and are ready to travel to New Zealand, we're also supporting the sponsor organization with the practical steps to get ready for that family to arrive. And once they arrive in the community, we work alongside both as well throughout that whole 2 years journey of resettlement. We're also providing some training and other resources for approved sponsors to help you prepare your organization to be ready for the refugees to arrive. And some of the training will be pre-developed, so we set that up for approved sponsors, but some of it can be individualized to suit your particular organization's needs as well. So we really want to work with you and what your needs are and how we can support you. And as Sarah said really early on in our session today, it's also about working alongside you on that one-to-one basis and making sure that you're ready and have all the support available from other support agencies. And we're making those connections with other support agencies already as well. So they are familiar with the program. So when the refugees arrive, they can support you with whatever support they can provide refugees with as well. And now it's really time for you to ask questions. And we have put quite a bit of time aside.
Birgit, shall I maybe put some of these questions to you and to Sarah and to the rest of us? So Ramat has asked, as a person or a family to be sponsored have to be recognised by refugees under the UNHCR, or can they be relatives of refugees that are not registered with the UNHCR? So the answer to that is they have to be registered, mandated, registered with the UNHCR in a country outside of their origin country. There's another question here from Emil. It's just saying, what does the matching of a refugee family with a sponsoring organisation entail? Are there criteria with that? Would you like to?
Sarah Ward,
Sarah,
I think that
would you be able to answer that?
Yep. So the UNHCR, we're working really closely with them to identify families who they think would be suitable for the CORES program. So we'd work closely. The sponsor organization will have hopefully quite a close working relationship with one of the host team. And so when we have a family that comes through the UNHCR identified pathway, we'll be talking first to Sarah McDonald and Birgit and Giselle about, hey, we've got a family who are sponsors that are looking to be matched with the UNHCR identified family. And then it'll be looking at skills and the capacity of the sponsor organizations. There'll be a real open conversation about this is the kind of supports the family need, and there might be certain locations that their skill set can be better applied to, or it might be the size of the team might be looking to support, you know, a family rather than a couple. So it's just some conversations about what's the best fit.
Yeah, but the criteria for either the matched or the nominated refugees is still the same within this program. So they still have to meet those criteria that were set for the course program, and UNHCR, of course, is aware of those. So when they identify them, they will meet those criteria as well.
Thanks, Birgit. I might have misunderstood that question. Sorry.
So good. So there's another one around timeframes, Sarah, that just saying, and what you were saying, that really we can't pin a time on the time frame between when flights are booked and when families arrive, or can we?
Yes. Yeah, so the tricky bit is the flights being booked is the last stage. So when we book the flights, we know when they're going to arrive, hopefully, inshallah. What's more difficult is working out how long it's going to take people to get here. We have to work in an international context on people's ability to get exit visas, how long it's going to take to get a medical. If people are in countries where we don't often do a lot of our quota work, we may have to really do some hard mahi to get the right team in there to do assessments for them, or get the necessary interviews done. But yeah, once we know sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And also, I just wanted to add to that, Sarah, sorry, there are other factors impacting that as well. Is, for example, there might be political reasons that may stop us bringing families out of a particular country, but also we're still operating, of course, in a COVID environment. So, it always depends what the current situation is in those countries as well, in terms of allowing them to travel or not.
Yeah, there was also an extend to that question about can one organisation partner with another organisation to ensure that they have the required financial resources?
Absolutely. We're even encouraging organizations, if they want to partner, that would be fantastic to pull those resources. I think what I would say is that it's just really important if you come together as partners, firstly, that you don't get too many people involved so that it doesn't overwhelm the whole group of what they need to do. And also keep in mind that everyone who's involved in the program specifically, they would need to do the child protection and the police vetting. But otherwise, partnering for resources, knowledge and skills would be absolutely fantastic. And we're happy to support any organizations that are exploring that at the moment, and also saying that we already have some organizations that are partnering. And I think it's really exciting because you also immediately have that wider community reach as well. And generally, in terms of the number of people, we would generally say maybe between 5 and 8 people is probably a good core group to be involved. And then within the 2 organizations of your partnership, or just within your organization, you have other people that can support that wraparound service as well. Great question.
So also just there's somebody talking about the need of people who are in India. If they're UNHCR mandated refugees in India, then yes, they can be eligible if they meet the other criteria to seek sponsorship here. In terms of the resettlement centre in Manukau, no, none of the community program sponsored refugees will go through Mangere Refugee Resettlement Centre.
Yeah, so that's where the program is different, and especially different from the pilot as well. So part of the extended pilot is that the families arrive directly into the community. depending on, what the criteria are in terms of COVID restrictions at the time. But the general idea is that they come straight into the community and you welcome them at the airport where they arrive and take them to their home. And then you start the welcome and the orientation for them. And again, Host Aotearoa as the umbrella organization will put together a lot of resources that you can use as well, or that you can localize for your context, so you don't all have to recreate and reinvent the wheel, but your local context best. So we're really relying on you for that as well.
So Sarah Ward, maybe you could answer this. So do refugees coming under the sponsorship program have permanent residency on arrival?
Yes, they're New Zealand permanent residents, yeah.
Great. And another question on, is it mandatory to access an immigration advisor supporting the process and completing the application by the sponsor organisation? No. Host Aotearoa will support you through that process. Yes, these PowerPoints are going to be available to you all as well as the recording. It'll all be there. Jack, we always talk about individuals as well as whānau, so absolutely, Rainbow whānau. It would be wonderful to have further conversations about that. So the other question here is, if a country didn't sign the convention and the country hosts refugees, are refugees eligible for community sponsorship, i.e. Libya? Sarah.
Thanks for the tough questions.
I knew that would happen.
Yeah, that's okay. What I think, there's no straightforward answer to that one, so I think we probably have to pick it up. But there are countries where we resettle people through the refugee quota that also haven't signed up to the UN, to the convention, and we work really closely with UNHCR to look at solutions. So I'm not saying that's a no, but I can't say hand on heart that it's a yes either. So if we keep that person's name, we can do a bit of background work for you.
So just another one, just in that ballpark between that time frame, just wanting to know how long she may have to pay for rent on an empty house before they got there, and it's a bit of a tricky one. Yeah.
So what we've aimed to do this time is, once you find a house, or you say, look, I've got a tenancy, or I'm going to be able to secure a tenancy from X date, we will work our darndest to get those flights booked and get it in lined up. And that's what we're hoping we'll do, is we'll try to line that up as much as possible so that people don't end up paying. We don't want you to pay rent for somebody that's not living in the house. So it's going to be a lot of close back and forth between yourselves and immigration team booking the flights.
Yeah, and just to clarify, there is the question on the settlement plan about what housing you're planning to find for the family, and there have been some confusions around that question. So you're not required to find accommodation until the refugees are actually approved and ready to travel to New Zealand. So you don't have to hold accommodation, and we'll work alongside you throughout that whole time, alongside Immigration New Zealand, so that you know at what stage the refugees are in terms of their application process.
So there's another question here around, what it constitutes a whānau grouping and a family group. Is a family a mother with children? Is it grandparents? Is it grandkids, adults? So again, back on that criteria aspect and what consists of family.
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's, we would consider a case that is submitted to us through UNHCR or would be classed as UNHCR. It's usually adults and dependent children. And dependent children is usually around the age of 24. If those children, in their upper 20s are married, they're no longer your dependents. They would be in their own separate household. So you need to think about it kind of around that sphere. Grandparents would be a separate case, so wouldn't be included in an application under this criteria.
So there's another question in terms of the sort of support that Host Aotearoa can give in terms of training support for whānau arriving in New Zealand, and and how will this work? who's responsible for the costs around that. Birgit.
So our role as the umbrella organization is really to coach the sponsor organizations through the process, so that we're really equipping sponsor organizations to supporting the refugee or the refugee family on the ground. And most of our information and resources will be created for the sponsor organization. So it's their responsibility to then support the refugees with the information that we're providing you with, or that you have locally yourselves. That's why you have, you're showing that wider community connections. But we can assist during that time as well. And of course, we can help make connections to others as well. Part of the training that we're providing for sponsor organizations, that's absolutely free, because that's part of our role to creating these for you. So at the moment, we've got an idea of what we're wanting to develop, but throughout the process, we'll be talking to sponsor groups as well in terms of what training needs they have, so we can develop that, and we'll make them available to other sponsor groups as well. And equally, what we are setting up, if an organization is approved, we also put them in touch with other sponsor organizations that have been approved, and we'll create a space where we can have the opportunity for people to talk to each other, create a bit of a community of practice where you can share your own experiences with each other, share tips and advice, and we are there to guide you through that process as well. I hope that answers the question.
So there's just a couple of questions there that sort of we could probably address. And one is that resettlement is happening in smaller regions than Aotearoa under the quota program, and has been, to varying degrees, quite successful, and definitely those who are resettled at the moment through this program have fared really well to this point. So there was a few hiccups there because, of course, we had March 15, the mosque shooting. So for some of that whānau who were connected, it's been a rough ride. However, with the support of their wider and their sponsorship community, it's been made a little easier. So yes, settling outside of the main cities is a fabulous thing to think about. And if you are from an organisation outside of any of our main cities, we'd love to hear from you and have a conversation about what that could look like for you.
Yeah, we'd love to go out into some regions, and also in some regions where there may not have been refugee resettlement happening. We've got one region at the moment where we haven't had quota refugees being resettled, and they're currently scoping what support services may be available locally to refugees, and I think that's really exciting. And I think that comes back to what Sarah said early on, this is a whole of society approach. It doesn't matter where in New Zealand, as long as we have people like you who are really committed to the program, wanting to make this work and have the resources and networks and connections to welcome them into your local community and help them feel, settled and have, that sense of belonging and that tūranga waiwai to Aotearoa.
So we'll be able to walk you through some of the harder questions that you might need to think about also if they are in smaller regions, depending on the whānau or the individual that you might be sponsoring. So all those conversations we can also have with you and as well. So there's a few, I'm just flicking through a couple more of the comments. Just in terms of going to the community, it takes time to process the benefit and who will be responsible for the bond. That is the organisation, that is the sponsorships organisation's financial support. So you are financially supporting that family or that individual until the work and income kicks in. You're also helping them with their rent and their bond and making sure that that is all secured for them. And then once their work and income kicks in, there's also things like possibly translation costs, but their day-to-day living has to be this sort of the same amount as work and income. We also offer you a really great template, a budget template, where you can go through and have a look see at what some of the costs might be. that you need to think about. So there is a financial, it's a financial commitment from an organisation, absolutely.
Yeah, and on a practical level, you also then support the refugee family once they arrive to then apply for, you know, an IRD number, so they can then go to Working Income and apply for their benefits. And often sponsor organizations help start building those relationships with those services before the refugees arrive, so that you already have that relationship, and once they arrive you can help them work through the application process as well. And that's probably something that needs to happen quite early on, so that, you know, that's in process.
And we're estimating that that would take up to 4 to 6 weeks until benefits start to kick in. So yeah, as Sarah said, it will be budgeted.
Just one last one for you, Sarah Ward, just in terms of like any sponsored refugee, because they're coming through under that pathway, are they then eligible to sponsor family? Are they eligible to bring family through family reunification?
Yep. So they're eligible to apply. Obviously, they would need to be assessed, but yep.
Yeah. So that's
Any other questions, Sarah? We're also going through the questions after the meeting tonight. So if we missed any questions, we'll write some answers and put them up on the website as well. On the website, we have a lot of frequently asked questions from sponsors. We've got the questions and answers from the first information session, and we'll put the ones from tonight on there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to address your statement, Jack, you know, and what we're saying that for our rainbow whānau, it might be more supports available within the bigger cities. So these are the sort of questions that we'll walk you through as host as well, and also draw from our community to be able to make sure everyone is best informed as well. Yeah. And I think we can answer the rest if give us a phone call, or we'll be already in touch. Some of you, I can see that we are already in touch, and you can have a conversation with me or with Giselle or Birgit, and we're here for you to have a conversation about these things.
Fantastic. Let's wrap it up. Really appreciate that you came tonight. So just wanted to highlight our website. We're still working on it at the moment. We're putting a lot more content together for you. But for now, the information is on the refugee sponsorship website, and have a look there at the information that's there. And also you can get in touch with me. How we usually work is that if you want to find out if this is something you want to do, get in touch with me, and then I'll have a chat with you. And if you then want to proceed, we'll usually match you with one of the coaches, and that will either Giselle or Sarah, and that will then be the person that will work alongside you through the whole process. But of course, all of us in the team will be available to provide support as well. And so have a look at the website for information. As we said earlier, we'll send out the recording of tonight's session alongside the slides. We can have a one-on-one conversation with you, but we can equally meet with your whole group if that's something that you want us to do. So any way we can support you, that's our role as the umbrella organization, really. And so we really look forward to hearing from you, and really lovely having you here with us tonight. Really appreciate it. Just before we sign off and let you go for dinner, just want to finish off with the karakia again. Kia mutu o mātou mahi, mō tēnei wā, manakitia mai mātou katoa, o mātou koa, o mātou whānau, aio ki te auranga. Our work has finished for the time being. Protect us all, our friends, our family, peace to the universe. Noho ora mai I te whānau. Go well, everyone. It was really nice to see you all tonight. Have a lovely evening. Bye. Edwin, can you stop the recording, please?
Ka kite.